So today we are, most of the time today will be spent on the review quiz. I made a pretty long review quiz per your all's suggestion, just to make longer review quizzes. So there are more questions for you to practice with. So that's a 30-question Kahoot quiz, so that'll take most of the time today. I'm going to just get into a little bit of the autonomic nervous system, so kind of introduce what it is. I've really had to cut down that material because we don't have a whole lot of time to go over it, which is fine. So it'll be a pretty broad overview of chapter 15 that we'll cover a little bit today and then finish up on Monday. Your next exam is Friday. I think most of you probably know that. So chapters 12 through 14, that's what we'll be doing the review for today. Class next Wednesday, I think I mentioned this already, but I have it set up for review for final on May 5th, so a week from today. That will be when I have all of your old exams, so you can come look at all of your old exams. I typically pull questions from the old exams, from the Kahoot review quizzes, in addition to a few kind of extra new questions for the final. So you can come and look at all of those, ask me questions about anything you have questions about for the final. It's optional, so you don't have to come if you don't feel like you want to look at your exams next Wednesday. You don't have to, it's totally up to you. I don't really have any formal review planned because there's so much material already on Canvas that you can use to review. In addition to, so that'll be, so you guys are normally on Zoom next week, you guys in class, so you'll just come here instead. There should be, I think we're only like, there's only 3 too many people in this class to have everyone in person, so I think we'll be fine if everyone, even if everyone shows up. I can have some of you guys look at your exams out in the hall. So if you do want to see your exams, just come here in person next week on Wednesday. Or if you just have questions you want me to answer or topics you want me to go over, it's kind of just an open-ended review for the final. Your final is May 10th at 10 a.m. So it'll be up where you take your exams normally in the bio labs. I'll send out an email reminder about that. And I have posted the review, or the study guide for the final. So that is available at the very bottom of the modules page on Canvas. No. So it's all the way down here. If you scroll all the way down, final exam study guide. It's about 3.5 pages of bullet points. I essentially took all of the previous study guides for each of the lecture exams and cut out a bunch of material that I will not ask about. So what I'm focusing on and what I want you guys to focus on in that study guide is are the aspects that I think are really important to kind of take forward into your next class, into AMP2 or any other kind of human bio based classes. If you haven't used the study guides yet for the lecture exams, I would highly suggest looking at the final study guide. It'll really cut down on what you need to focus on rather than focusing on every topic we went over. Like I said, this cuts it down a lot. So it's only 3.5 pages. It's still a lot of material, but it's much less than the amount of material we went over this semester. So take a look at that sooner rather than later, so you can kind of start to prepare for the final. The final is going to be, I'll kind of cover this again, probably Monday, but 100 questions. So it's double the length of a normal test. And yeah, 100 questions, all multiple choice. I don't think I'm going to do any fill in the blank. So it'll be all multiple choice questions and only questions based on what I put on that study guide, the final study guide. Good? Any questions about that? Okay. All right, let me pull up the autonomic nervous system PowerPoint. Okay. So I'm really just going to get into the very basics of the autonomic nervous system today. And I mean, in general, we're not going to have a lot of time to go into too much detail. So this is going to be an overview of kind of what the autonomic nervous system is. So far, we've been talking about the conscious nervous system, so how we control our skeletal muscles mostly, that kind of, and a few additional things, but the autonomic nervous system is all about the unconscious control of different visceral parts of the body. So organs that you don't think about, but that still react in certain ways to different stimuli. It's a pretty interesting part of the nervous system, and I'm going to try to focus on the most interesting parts because we only have so much time, so why not? So the autonomic nervous system, like I said, it's the involuntary part, so it's automatic. You don't have to think about whether your heart rate increases. You don't have to think about when digestion needs to speed up, that kind of stuff. That's what the autonomic nervous system takes care of. It innervates the other kinds of muscle that we haven't talked about really, smooth muscle and cardiac muscle, along with glands. So this is not innervating skeletal muscle. That's all of the other aspects of the nervous system, the peripheral nervous system that we've talked about thus far. And this helps to basically create, in an ideal world, the optimal functioning of your body. So if you need to digest, energy will be put towards digestion, and that part of the autonomic nervous system will be enacted. If you need to run away from a fire, that part of the autonomic nervous system will kick in and help you get away from some kind of danger. So it doesn't always work perfectly, and we'll talk about what happens when it doesn't work perfectly, but ideally it's kind of this balance between the two sides of it, which would be sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. And I've showed you this graphic before. So we're in the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is pretty simple from an anatomical standpoint. It's the brain and spinal cord. We spent a good amount of time on the brain and spinal cord. But now we're over in the peripheral nervous system. So everything outside of that, all of the nerves coming off of the central nervous system. We're in the motor division. So this is the division that controls the actions of organs and muscles. We're down in the autonomic side rather than the somatic. Somatic is mostly dealing with skeletal muscle. So all of the conscious movements we make are in the somatic nervous system. And then, yeah, a final division, we're at the very bottom of this complicated setup of the peripheral nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic. So I'm going to talk about what each of these two divisions is responsible for in the autonomic nervous system. And a little bit about the anatomy, but we'll get into that on Monday. So like I said, today we're just going to do a really broad overview of what these two divisions do in the autonomic nervous system. So some examples, I kind of mentioned a couple already, of functions of the autonomic nervous system. This is both of those divisions combined. It can change your body temperature. So if you need to kill off a virus that's invading you, it'll increase your body temperature to give you a fever or bring your body temperature down when you're sleeping. It can send extra blood to a particular area. Muscles if you need to run away from something, your stomach if you need to digest faster or focus on digestion. It can slow down your heartbeat, or it can increase your heartbeat if you're stressed and in front of a group of people talking. It can alter, yeah, I already said that, alter your stomach secretions for digestion. So now we're kind of going to divide this into a couple of those two different segments. The effects are going to change based on what situation you're in. So if you're in a stressful situation, essentially the sympathetic part of the nervous system is going to take over. If you're not in a stressful situation and you're able to rest and relax, that's the parasympathetic side. And I'll define that, I think, on the next slide here. But depending on what needs to happen, if you need to run away from some kind of danger, certain aspects of the autonomic nervous system will be enacted. If you don't need to and your body needs to focus on digesting material, digesting food, then the other half of that autonomic nervous system will be enacted. So totally just depends on what your current situation is, which aspects of the ANS will be activated. See, I already mentioned the names of the two divisions, sympathetic and parasympathetic. They sound obviously very similar. They're, as I kind of already hinted at, sort of competing divisions, competing subdivisions of the autonomic nervous system. They have opposite, totally opposite effects on the body. They have totally opposite effects on the same organs. So the organs are dually innervated. So the heart, the stomach, those are the blood vessels, those are innervated by both sides of this, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, but depending on which is enacted will determine the result in that organ. So if your heart rate increases, it's being affected by the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system is called the fight or flight part, fight or flight response. I think everyone's heard of fight or flight. So this is a stressful situation. If you're in some kind of stressful situation that requires you to run away or fight something for survival, your sympathetic nervous system is going to be activated. And I'll talk about what happens in that case in just a second. On the other side, if you're not in danger, you don't have to fight anyone or run away from something, you can rest and digest. So that's the side of that's the parasympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system. Rest and digest is parasympathetic, fight or flight is sympathetic. Those are kind of the easiest ways to remember these two halves of the autonomic nervous system. And again, it all just depends on what situation you're in. These days, unfortunately, in our society, our sympathetic nervous system is often enacted and activated far too often. So we have these high levels of stress sort of all the time, which stress is a good thing, but when it's always occurring in your body and your sympathetic response is constantly activated, it can cause some issues, which we'll talk about with chronic stress on Monday. Okay. So that's the basic breakdown. We have fight or flight and rest and digest. A little more detail about each of these. The sympathetic nervous system is basically going to mobilize your body for activity. This is, yeah, the fight or flight side. It induces stress. Like I just said, stress is a good thing. You want some stress if you're trying to run away from a saber-toothed tiger, if you're running away from a burning house, if you're running away from someone who's trying to do harm to you, stress is good. It releases endorphins, hormones that increase your heart rate. I think I have next. Yeah, so it'll increase your heart rate, get your blood pumping, get it pumping to skeletal muscles in order for you to get away from that danger, whatever that danger may be. So these days we can attribute a few different types of situations to activating the sympathetic nervous system. So that's going to be exercise. So when you exercise, your heart rate goes up, maybe your mouth doesn't get dry, but your pupils will dilate, you might get sweaty. And that happens not only during exercise, but when you're excited, when you're embarrassed, during some kind of emergency. So all of these E activities, that's a good way to remember it, will activate the sympathetic nervous system. When you were at the symposium, you might have been really nervous talking in front of a group of people. So That could be a version of, I guess, embarrassment, but just some kind of stress. So your heart rate probably went up when you got in front of that crowd. Your breathing rate may have increased. Your mouth may have gone kind of dry. You may have started sweating. That's just the sympathetic nervous system becoming activated in that stressful situation. And during vigorous physical activity, so like working out, exercising, the sympathetic nervous system plays a huge role. It's going to shunt a lot of blood to your skeletal muscles. So the blood vessels are going to basically dilate, your heart rate's going to go up, you're going to get a lot of blood going to your skeletal muscles in order to provide them with oxygen and nutrients. Your bronchioles will dilate, which is, those are in your lungs. It'll help bring in more oxygen to your blood, which will get to your muscles. And then something we don't really think about, but this also, when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, it releases glucose from the liver. Glucose is needed for cellular respiration. It's the main food, essentially, that will allow for ATP production. So all of those things happen during vigorous physical activity, or potentially some of these others, some kind of emergency or excitement. So that's the sympathetic nervous system in a tiny nutshell. The parasympathetic nervous system is just the opposite. So it's conserving energy, and it's really responsible for kind of maintenance. The sympathetic nervous system gets everything activated. It's not all about maintenance. Parasympathetic is all about just maintaining a nice balance between your different systems. This is the rest and digest side of things. It has a calming effect. So the organs that are innervated when the parasympathetic nervous system is activated are going to be calmed down. So your heart rate will go down, your breathing rate will go down, and then this is the side of the autonomic nervous system that has a large role in digestion. So digestion, diuresis, which has to do with urination, and then defecation. So lots of processing of food material, essentially, and then ridding your body of that material. That's the parasympathetic side. An example here would be a person relaxing, and I have reading, but I don't know that anyone reads after a meal these days. Watching TV after a meal, maybe you're relaxing, you're digesting your food, blood pressure is going to go down, heart rate's going to go down, respiratory rates will go down. So everything just kind of slows down and calms down. And then the energy is going towards digesting that food. So the activity that increases is really the gastrointestinal tract activity. Pupils will, rather than becoming dilated like they do when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, they'll become constricted. So when these different systems are activated, sometimes it's easier to read far away versus close up. Maybe not when you're young, but as you get older, you might notice a difference after during a restful period versus when you're excited and kind of on edge. So we could probably do a lot more of activating our parasympathetic nervous system today. I know I'm saying that you have to take a stressful test on Friday, but trying to activate, and I'll talk about this a little bit more on Monday, activating the parasympathetic nervous system can do a lot of good for your body, because we don't really get enough of that these days. Everything's stressful. All right, that's where we're going to stop with that material today. We are going to get into we'll finish that up on Monday, and then we'll do the Kahoot review quiz now for the exam on Friday. All right. So you guys on Zoom, I'm going to get you set up in front of here. All right, so like I said, this is 30 questions, so it's pretty long. If we don't get through it all, I've already posted the link to Canvas, so you should be able to see it there. As a reminder, the chapters that we covered were the nervous tissue chapter, chapter 12. Chapter 13 was spinal cord, somatic reflexes, spinal nerves. And then chapter 14 was cranial anatomy and cranial nerves. So it's a lot of material. It's always a lot of material. But it's all nervous system material. Some of these questions are harder than others, but like I usually do, I tend to pull at least a couple questions from these review quizzes for the exam. So it's probably a good idea to go back and look at this as you're studying. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Feel free to join if you haven't yet. The info should be at the bottom of the screen. Here we go. Which part of a neuron receives signals from other neurons? All right, dendrites. Yep. So dendrites are going to receive signals, axons are sending signals away to other neurons. All right. A neuron's voltage changes from -70 to +15. Which action potential phase is this neuron in? So we're going from negative to positive. That's the important part. Depolarization. So it was between depolarization and repolarization for most people, so that's good. Depolarization is where a neuron at rest, which is negative. When depolarization happens, that charge goes up, an action potential is released and basically sent down, say, an axon of that neuron. So that's the energy that will be sent to release ions or whatever needs to be done. So depolarization, you're going from negative to positive, or at least negative to less negative. So that's kind of the upward swing. Repolarization, it's going back to the negative side. So repolarization is where the inside of the neuron becomes more negative again. So these happen back to back, depolarization followed by repolarization. Which cells make up the myelin sheath in the peripheral nervous system? Nice, Schwann cells. So Schwann cells are in the peripheral nervous system. Oligodendrocytes are the cells that make up the myelin sheath in the central nervous system. So two different cells make up the myelin sheath depending on what part of the nervous system you're in. Astrocytes and satellite cells are also important cells that you want to know. I ask a lot about the myelin sheath, so spend some time looking back at the myelin sheath, understanding what it is, what its purpose is, what makes it up. Which of the following neurotransmitters is a monoamine? This is a tough one. All right, so yeah, epinephrine. There were 4 major categories of neurotransmitters that I mentioned. Acetylcholine is in a class all by itself. Then the other 3 have something to do with amino acids. So GABA and glycine are both amino acids. So they're in the amino acid category. Monoamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, those are both monoamines. And then there's neuropeptides. I didn't give any examples of neuropeptides. I just mentioned them as a category. So you want to know those 4 categories of neurotransmitters. All right. These neurons are the decision-making neurons connecting the motor and sensory pathways. Okay, interneurons. Interneurons are in between the motor or the sensory and the motor. So sensory neurons are going to take information in, send it to the interneuron. That interneuron is making the decision as to what to tell the motor neuron to do. The motor neuron then sends out that information to the effector organ. All right. Which of the following is a disease that involves degeneration of the myelin sheath? Again, another myelin sheath question. Nice, yeah, multiple sclerosis. These are 3 diseases that you want to be familiar with. I have questions about the other 2 in here also. Multiple sclerosis is where the myelin sheath degenerates over time. At rest, the internal charge of a neuron is, I kind of alluded to this already. Same as a muscle cell, if you remember that. Hey, guys. You guys are way more fun than 8 a.m. So yeah, the internal charge of a neuron is negative. Muscles, the internal charge is negative. So a lot of the cells that like do stuff in our body that send signals are negative at rest. That depolarization is when the action potential is released and the charge goes up. All right. Number 8. Okay, here's another disease. Parkinson's involves the loss of motor function due to degeneration of neurons that release what? Dopamine, nice. Yeah, so dopamine is a neurotransmitter basically that's affected by Parkinson's disease. You want to remember that. And that's what causes the shakiness of the muscles. Because dopamine typically calms the nervous system down. Without that calming, you get a lot of tremors in the muscles. All right. Short-term memory is enhanced by elevated levels of which ion? We've talked about all these ions, but only one affects memory. All right, calcium. Well, not most people, but it was the most popular category. So calcium, if there's elevated levels of calcium in your neurons, you can remember stuff much better over the short term, at least, compared to someone who doesn't have as much calcium, say in their blood, which makes it to their neurons. So calcium is really important when it comes to short-term memory. All right, neurofibrillary tangles are associated with which disease? Nice, yeah, I already asked about the other 2, so by process of elimination, hopefully you figured Alzheimer's. So neurofibrillary tangles along with beta amyloid buildup are two symptoms that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. So you want to know those 3 diseases, their symptoms, and then as much as is known about their cause. So a lot of it's unknown still. All right. Number 11, on to the next chapter. So we're into spinal stuff now. The blank space separates the duramater from the vertebral bones. All right. So this is where you want to remember those three membranes. They're the same in the spinal cord as they are in the brain. So you have the duramater, which is the most superficial, arachnoid mater, and then pia mater. So if you can remember those, you can probably deduce from the name where these spaces are. So epi means on top of, so epidural, that is on top of the duramater. Subarachnoid, obviously under the arachnoid mater. Subdural, under the duramater. So the epidural space is kind of that space at the most outer edge of those three membranes. This is a tough one. Which tract carries information regarding tissue injury to the central nervous system? All right, nice. Wow, spino-reticular. The spinal tracts are really hard to remember. I don't have a great way for you to remember them, but at least for the ones I want you to know, keep them separated as to whether they're ascending or descending. Ascending tracts are going to send information up, so basically sensory information, which is what this would be. Tissue injury to the central nervous system, that's going to be an ascending tract. Descending sends information back out to the motor, the effector organs. So spino-reticular deals specifically with tissue injury. These other two, gracile fasciculus and spinothalamic, they're ascending as well. They deal with pain, just not specifically tissue injury. And then corticospinal is a descending tract, so that would not fit into this. So just a reminder to look back at the ascending and descending tracts and kind of what they send information about. This membrane wraps around each individual axon in a nerve. Oh, equally split almost. So endoneurium. This is kind of similar to those muscle membranes that you needed to know. So the epineurium is on the outermost. That's going to be around the entire nerve, so a bunch of axons. Perineurium is around the fascicles, which is kind of a smaller group of axons. Each axon, which is kind of the smallest unit within a nerve, is surrounded by the endoneurium, so the most internal of those membranes. All right, the distal branches of spinal nerves form what? Nice, good job. So yeah, those distal branches are the branches of the nerves that are kind of farther away from the spinal cord. They form those nerve plexuses. There's 5 nerve plexuses that you want to be familiar with. Good job. All right, halfway there. Many reflexes require what? Which prevents antagonistic muscles from interfering with the agonist. Nice, reciprocal inhibition. So the antagonist muscle, if you're thinking about like the knee-jerk reflex, your quads are going to be activated. Your hamstring needs to be unactivated so your foot can kick out. So your hamstring is reciprocally inhibited when the knee-jerk reflex, the patellar tendon reflex is activated. So reciprocal inhibition is necessary for a lot of reflexes. So some muscle doesn't fight against the muscle that's experiencing the reflex. All right. A section of the brain often controls the opposite side of the body. What is this called? So like the right side of your brain controls the left side of your body a lot of times. Oh, no one got it. Decussation. Cross extension reflex sounds like that would make sense, but that's a reflex. It's not necessarily a control. Ipsilateral control is the term we didn't go over, but that's actually controlling the same side of the body. Decussation, I didn't spend a whole lot of time on, obviously. So it's just the control across the midline of the body. So like I said, the right side of your brain controlling the left side of your body, that is decussation. Oh yeah, no one got it. Nothing changed. A cluster of neurons outside, neurosomas outside the CNS, the central nervous system. All right, ganglion, or ganglia if it was plural. So ganglia are the neurosomas, so the main cell bodies, not the axons, not the dendrites, just the main cell, neuron cell bodies. When those are clustered together, sometimes there's thousands of them together in one area, that's called a ganglion. All right, this nerve plexus contains the median nerve. Brachial. So the median nerve is the one that's often irritated in carpal tunnel syndrome. So the median nerve is, because it's carpal tunnel, it's in the arm, which should make you think brachial plexus. So median nerve is the important one that you want to know in the brachial plexus. What else? I guess the others were kind of equally spread. There are three nerves that you want to know and what plexus they're in from that section. Median is one of them. All right. Which type of reflexes involve the action of skeletal muscles? Yay, somatic. Good job. Okay, all of the others do not involve skeletal muscle. So visceral and autonomic, we kind of just talked about those control organs. Somatic reflexes deal with skeletal muscles. Glandular, no, those are not skeletal muscles. All right, 20. Section of the spinal cord that tapers just below the lumbar enlargement. Nice, the medullary cone. So it's a cone, so it tapers, right? It's the spinal cord. It tapers right down near the lumbar section. The cervical enlargement, cervical is neck. So if we're talking about lumbar, it's nothing to do with the cervical. The cauda equina, those are in the lumbar region, but those are just nerve, basically nerve roots, a bundle of nerve roots in the lumbar region. So medullary cone, cauda equina, cervical enlargement, you want to know all of those terms. All right, 21. So on to, this is cranial stuff now. Ridges of tissue on the surface of the cerebrum. What are those called? Nice, gyri. So gyri are the raised ridges, sulci are those little valleys in between the ridges. All right, 22. So injury to the hypothalamus may result in all of the following except. So basically, what does the hypothalamus not control out of these four? This is a tough one. Oh, nice. One person got it. Okay, so this is a really tough one. The functions of the brain are tough. So the hypothalamus A is really important. Make sure you study what the hypothalamus does. It controls a lot of different aspects. It does not control, however, fine motor control. The thalamus, closely related and close by, does control a lot of our motor actions. So that's a tough one. The hypothalamus controls body temperature, dehydration, and hunger satiation, as well as sleep cycles. So go back and study the hypothalamus for sure and know what it does and where it is. Okay. Which type of matter forms the cortex of the cerebrum and the cerebellum? So you have to know what the cortex is. Almost evenly split, but on the wrong side. So cortex, does anyone remember if the cortex is on the outer or the inner part of the brain? Like outer surface, inner part? As the outer, yeah. So the cortex is on the outside. It's the most superficial part of the brain, the cerebrum and cerebellum. That's made of gray matter. So you have gray matter outside, white matter inside in the brain. In the spinal cord, it's flipped. In the spinal cord, you have gray matter inside, white matter outside. That's something you definitely want to know. Okay, let's see if we can let's do one more. The blank is a thick bundle of nerves at the base of the cerebrum. Wow. Okay, so the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is a bunch of nerves at the base of the cerebrum, which is a big part of the brain with all the folds. It is what allows the left and the right side of the brain to talk to each other. So it's a really important part right at the base of the cerebrum. All right, we'll stop there. Let's see who ended up first. Gwyneth, nice. Bradley's out. Oh yeah, Bradley. Nice. Number 2. Good job. You were out there for a while. Destiny, number 3. Good job, guys. So there's 5 or 6 more questions. Make sure you look at those. I posted this to the link on Canvas, so you can go check it out on your own time. I'll see y'all Friday up in the labs where we take exams. Oh yeah, and can I have your exams back? Thank you.